Good afternoon, everyone. Today is Thursday, February 10th. We are here in the SAR Academy conference room. Good news is we have a vacation coming up, so we're just trying to get a few things in before the vacation. This is our third episode of Opening Up, SAR Academy's podcast. I want to thank Yael Baker, the Director of Communications, for making this happen. I want to thank our tech team for putting this all together and making sure that we can be heard. And I want to thank our guests, who I'll introduce in a moment. My name is Binny Krauss. I have two very special guests today. And we're going to talk about a topic that is, I think, deeply important. You might say sensitive, but it's critical to the future of where our kids are going to be, and I think it's healthy to talk about it openly, and I think we have the people here who are the right people to talk about it. Jack Bendheim is the president of SAR and has been in this role for?
I think something like 35 years, but not 100% sure.
Okay, I've been here for 17, and I know that my predecessors spoke fondly of you then, and on behalf of this entire community, we are grateful to you for what you do here. Why are you still doing this?
I do it because this gives me a lot of pleasure.
Because you get a lot of, you're running a business, you're involved in American politics, Israeli politics.
Right.
SAR is great, but I want to understand.
I think the success of SAR, which is not due to me, but is definitely due to the principals and all the staff, has given me, and not just me, other people on the board, a lot of pleasure in terms of the continued success, the growth, the success. And listen, there are always problems. There's problems in a business. There are problems, definitely problems in the school. But I think we can point to the success to show that people recognize there are some problems, but they still want to come here. They will send their kids here. In some cases, they want to send their grandchildren here. And that's great. I mean, our problem today is the other side of the problem, which is we're full. And there is a point of one has to be careful, I think, in a school of just not keeping growing.
Right. And I should say, I missed this at the beginning. You're a grandparent of how many kids? Sorry.
I'm a grandparent of 36
How
kids.
many of them are SAR students?
And 6.
The others were not accepted, or they're living other places?
The others chose to live in New Jersey. So they pay that price, and when you live in New Jersey, you can't go to SAO.
Well, seriously, we're very, very grateful for the role that you play here. And I know you don't like to talk about you, but it's made a difference to so many people, generations of kids. And we'll get back to you in a second. I'm also here with Debra May, who graduated SAR in
1985.
So a year after I graduated SAR. We were both, SAR was pretty flexible with their graduation requirements. So we both graduated. I mean, with me they were flexible. With you graduated.
I graduated.
We both graduated in the 80s. I was here for 3 years. You were here for longer.
I was here from 4-year nursery.
And you came back when?
I came back in August of 2003.
Okay, I've been here 17. You've been here for your math is better than mine. That's why you're here.
19 years.
19 years, and we're very grateful to you as the executive director of SAR since 2003. Lots have happened. We're going to talk about that. Lots has happened since 2003, but to have a principal, I can speak for myself, and an executive director, and so many teachers who are graduates of the school, I think, Jack, is something that we're also pretty proud of. That's a nice thing.
Absolutely, I think it's something to be proud of.
Right. So the previous conversations were very different from each other, and I think this is going to be a third just different conversation. We spoke with Mora Sarah Richter about teaching Hanukkah to your kids. That was our first episode. We spoke to Dr. Josh Milner and Dr. Tina Lerner about the vaccines and how that impacts our community. Obviously, we are not yet out of the woods with Corona, although I do think we're entering a different stage, but we're not going to talk about that tonight. And tonight, we had a board meeting this week. We approved the board approved the budget for next year. This is the board. We have 3 board meetings a year. We have about 6 executive committee meetings a year, and this is the board meeting where we talk about tuition. And Jack, like you said, you've been doing this whether it's 30 years or 40 years or somewhere in between. You've been doing this for a long time. So I'm interested in your very, very broad view of how has this meeting gone over the last 40 years, and how has it changed over the last 40 years, or how has the conversation been different?
So the conversation, I think, has evolved, and when we have these board meetings, we also talk about the increases of salaries to teachers and staff. And I think the board, the executive committee, everyone recognizes that the school is only going to be as good as their teachers.
Okay.
And we also appreciate that deciding to become a teacher or to be involved in a Jewish day school is not the place you're going to earn the most money. But we all feel it's our obligation that it shouldn't be the kind of job that you can't take because you're not going to be able to put food on the table or get housing or take vacations. Mm-hmm. So, and that's the rub in a way, that we know when we raise salaries, it also means sort of immediately we have to raise tuitions.
Okay.
And tuition is, I think, in all the years and all the board meetings, it's the common denominator of discussions. And every year we say to ourselves, how can we keep raising tuitions? Every year we do the math. And the math for our community is an average of 4 kids.
Right.
And if you look at the tuitions, I mean, look at
You're talking about right, 25,000. Okay,
right,
rough
so,
numbers. 25,000
so look at the
school.
Right, you look at the sticker price of, let's say, $25,000 in elementary, 4 kids, $100,000 after tax. So there you are on January 1st, and before you've paid any food for the year, before you've paid your rent, before you've contemplated vacation, you have to earn approximately, living in New York City, approximately $200,000 in order to send your kids to school.
Which already puts you in the top something of, I don't know, it's 3% or 7%.
It's a crazy number, and the number, in amazing ways, falls unfairly on people who can afford it.
Right.
Because parents who cannot afford it, we have a scholarship program, and I think from the beginning of time, and going back to Ludwig Jesselson and Edmund Lang, who were the founders here, and Yitzhak Greenberg, we've always said, and I think we've done it, that no one gets turned away because they can't afford it.
So there's no scholarship budget?
There's no scholarship budget, which I think is different from many other schools. We also, I think, the scholarship committee runs in a very anonymous and very decent way. Mm-hmm. We don't call parents in for interviews, so we're not looking to embarrass anybody. But basically, if you can't afford it, you'll get help from the school to send your kids here.
So we just approved the budget, but we have I wouldn't say we have no idea. We obviously have history, but we didn't approve as a line item, we're going to give out X amount of dollars in scholarship for next year. Because It doesn't matter because...
Well, it does, but we have an estimate of a history.
Right.
I mean, if there were, forgetting, ELC, if you're from 1st to 8th, you have 7 years of experience.
Right.
So I would say, just to add to what you're saying, it's not so much that there isn't a budgeted number. We, of course, plug a number in the budget. We have to kind of figure out where we're going. But when I meet with the scholarship committee, they don't care about that number.
Okay.
In other words, they're operating based on the need that they see and kind of assessing the need.
And that's the mandate that
and
they
fulfilling the need. That's their mandate. So every once in a while, there may be a curiosity. Debra, how much scholarship has the committee awarded so far in our meetings? And I can answer that question. But they're not using that scholarship number as a guide for how much they can give out.
Right. And that is different from, I actually don't want to say, I think there are
I don't
a lot of
know.
Jewish schools that do the same thing, but it might be different from other schools. But let's demystify this for a second. I mean, how much scholarship are we giving out?
So this year, the committee will be giving out close to around $8 million in scholarship.
$8 million in scholarship.
It's a big number.
It's a big number. Now, again, it's a big number of a bigger number, which is our budget, which has grown over the years. And Jack, the legend is that there used to be kind of the Riverdale, right? The Riverdale community you and sat around a table like this at the end of the year, and you're like, okay, well, we gave out X in scholarship, and
It's totally not true.
oh, okay, great. So
It's totally not true.
We don't have to talk about the legend because it didn't even happen.
No, it never happened.
But it used to be easier.
Listen, when the numbers are smaller, it's always, it's always easier.
Right.
But the budget this year is close to $42 million.
Right.
And that means we're spending $42 million.
Right.
And that's one line. It's an easy line. And the majority of that spend is salaries and benefits.
Okay.
How you get it, how you raise it, is through lots of different lines of state grants and foundation grants and individual grants, et cetera, et cetera. The most amazing thing is, and as I was saying earlier, that the Jewish community over these last 30, 40 years has become a wealthier community.
Right.
And people, the majority, I mean, we get 50% of our students get scholarships, which also means that 50% of our students don't get scholarships.
Right. Both of those are interesting numbers. Right?
Yeah, but the crisis, which I started alluding to earlier, is a crisis of that part of the 50% that can afford scholarships that creates huge pressure on the family. That someone's sitting in his job and they're in the top 1 or 2% people paid in the United States, and all the friends are talking about their Caribbean vacations, and they can't do it.
Even though everyone's telling them how successful they are.
Right, because they can't send their kids to public school.
Right.
And
you live in Scarsdale, the best public school district in the country.
And you have to go and schlep your kids.
Pay the taxes for it.
And schlep your kids down to SAR. And it is a crisis. And
that was my question. There is a crisis. What's the crisis?
Well, that's a crisis. The crisis is that our parent body that is struggling to pay and want to pay, and counting on maybe their grandparents to help the kids. So that diminishes over time because it's a long multiplication. That you have 4 kids, but you have 4 kids, you each have 4 kids. Well, that's 16.
Right.
That doesn't work eventually. And it's something that the Jewish community obviously needs to do. But where SAR has been very successful is that percentage of people who can easily afford it, and delivering a product to them which is so good that even though they've just spent $200,000 pre-tax in sending their kids to the school, that they're happy, and I would say it's happy, to dig into their pockets to support the school and support, in many ways, what people might consider extras.
Right.
And what we've seen over the years to become the fundamental part of the school.
Right.
That you don't need to deny yourself anything. We have whatever club you're thinking of. I'm not sure we do skiing because
We'll talk about that. No, we don't have a ski. I don't think we have a ski club yet.
No, but
The high school has an ice hockey team, but I don't think we have a ski club.
Okay, but sort of everything else. So you're able literally to look those fellow workers in the eye and say, yes, you're living in Scarsdale, you're paying, well, I'm living with you in Scarsdale, we're paying this enormous real estate tax.
Enormous.
And I'm doing this extra, but my kids are getting a phenomenal education. Not, as good as a Scarsdale education.
So you told me that there is a crisis, which I appreciate, and the crisis is that this is really hard for, I guess you're going to say, the people in the middle, right? In other words, there might be people who are on scholarship no matter what. There might be people who could afford it no matter what. But there's a big group of people in the middle who actually are really, not actually, but are really struggling to do this. Now, I want to break this down for a second, because I think if you talk about the cost of education per child, we're like within a range. It doesn't mean that I don't think we're at an extreme. $25,000 is pretty much within the range of what it costs in New York City. It's less than what it costs in Scarsdale to educate a child in a school. That's what it costs. The question is, and the fact is, there's a separation of church and state in this country, which means that if you choose to go to private school, the government's not going to pay for that, although we'll talk about government funding in a second. But that doesn't mean that people can afford it. And I guess my question to you, Jack, is what are the values here? Some people have said, Why are we, it's great, SAR is amazing, but why, not everyone can afford a Cadillac. Why do we think that everyone should have a Cadillac when maybe we should get along with a Chevy? And that's why there's been a network of schools that have been trying to say, you know what, we can't do 25, we're going to do 15 or 12 or 18. And what's the philosophy here about that? Because you said, we have everything. Like, do we have to have everything? Should we have everything?
No one needs to have everything. That's simple. But I think by having the programs that we have, we've been able to attract people, as I said earlier, who, in that 50%, let's assume they represent 20 of the 50, and they're so thrilled that they will help the other 30, and most importantly, help the second 50. Mm-hmm. In other words, make it all available, and then the school becomes such an attractive place. And
that seems to have happened here.
It has happened, and it's better for the teachers. I mean, I don't want to be the president of a school that charges the most in tuition. I would like to be the president of a school that pays the most in salaries to teachers.
Okay.
And because of that, has the best teachers available. We all know the percentages and everything else. It's not easy to be an Orthodox Jew. It's not easy to go out in this world, and the world is far more challenging today than it was when I was growing up, mm-hmm. because there are fewer options. Literally, everything's available, and the school's starting vacation Saturday night or Sunday, and I'm sure if someone goes out to Park City, they're going to meet SAR parents and students on the Hill, and doing it in the right way, and arrange for kosher food to come out, and see to it that there's a minyan, and all the things that we want, and that's part of it.
Do you think there's a problem with our community? Is our community out of touch with reality, or are we lucky? Are we?
No, I think we work very, very, very hard. Our parents work very, very hard, as does everyone else in our society today. I mean, our community has decided not to opt out. So they've decided to be totally involved in their communities, involved in their jobs. So there are no barriers. I mean, the greatness of America is there are no barriers for people who decide that don't call me on Saturday. But other than that, I'm available, and I'll come in on Sunday. And, cover for me on Rosh Hashanah, I'll cover for you on Christmas. And it's all accepted. It's all available. And I think SAR plays a role in that. Those are our parents. Those are our kids. And it's done, as I said, a great job. And you asked me why am I doing it so long? Because I get greatest satisfaction.
Okay. I'm going to quote some members of our finance committee, Noah Weisberger, and Noah, you'll forgive me for being quoted on this podcast. We'll edit you out if you insist. But
I think you should.
Noah always talks about the levers. I want to thank Steve Neuwirth, who's the chairman of our finance committee. Our finance committee works really hard on actually looking at these numbers. You talk about $42 million of expenses. We should be looking at that. We should make sure that we're doing it responsibly. But what Noah's always said is there aren't that many levers, right? If you want to change the model, the three levers, I think. But there are really two levers. One of them is expenses, one of them is revenues, right? If you want to change the model, you have to either lower your expenses or you have to increase your revenues. And the reason why I say three is because the lowering the expenses is just lowering expenses, cost cutting. And maybe you could divide that into two, Debra, right? You could talk about this cost cutting on, getting a new utility company, and there's cost cutting on changing the personnel structure, right? And on the revenue side, the levers are also pretty simple. There's fundraising. This year, on the operating side, there's about $4.5 million of fundraising that SAR does, and maybe Jack could talk about whether we could do more or less or whatever. And there's government funding, which Jack, you've also been very involved with through Teach New York State and through your belief that that we can perhaps support or maybe. I don't know if we could solve the crisis, but we can make the crisis a little bit. We can abate the crisis a little bit through government funding. But that's basically it.
There is a third.
Okay, what is it?
There is a third, and if I'll leave government funding to the side right now, but if you look at all the great schools, universities, even high schools in the United States, people have managed over their 40, 50, 60, maybe 100-year existence to build up huge endowment funds,
Okay.
which then throw off money which support the school. So I dare say most kids who go to Harvard don't pay full tuition.
You dare say.
Yes, I dare say. I didn't even go to Harvard to dare say. They get supported by the school. There are a plethora of scholarship programs available.
And I think they say when you go to these open houses at Harvard or Columbia, they say, don't be shocked by the sticker price. It's just a sticker price. In other words, they expect people to understand that whatever the tuition is, which is enormous, is not what most people are paying, not what half. I don't know.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. So on average, people who graduate from those great schools with big endowments are left with lower student loans than if they go to a smaller school somewhere, state schools that are with lower tuition. So I think that's what we need to do. People have said it for a long time, but I think the community in these last 3, 4, 5 years has done so well. We need the people who can afford it to step to the plate and start creating big endowments for our community. Now, our community is a hard community to support because everyone basically says,
Why support them?
I support them. I just saw the guy in Park City, Utah, skiing.
Right.
But we're in that community. We're out there, and it's always you can always feel good supporting people who are not as active as we are in the economy of the United States. But what you want is to build the infrastructure, to build the kids that get out there that ultimately will support you and ultimately will support what you believe in and support the schools you believe in that will go on Aliyah, move to Israel for those who didn't get that. So I think there's a strong argument. We're not done it. We haven't done it yet.
But we've started, Jack, right? We've started to
How's
build
the
our endowment over the last 3 years. I think our endowment has grown by $4 million. And I mean, those numbers are huge numbers. Part of that was thanks to the UJA, which was involved in their endowment program, and to several donors who really stepped up for SAR. And what we see is those numbers make a difference in terms of what our draw then is from the endowment, which goes straight back into our operating budget, which is what Jack is really talking about. Ultimately, if we could really multiply those numbers by 10, that's when it would really make a difference and really impact our overall structure.
So I think we talked about 10 years ago, we were about $3 million in our endowment. Now we're at $15 million. It sounds like and is a lot of money, but the reason why it's hard to raise money for endowment is because we need to pay for tomorrow, right? So it's always been hard because $15 million brings in 5%. So, I mean, what are you looking at to really make a dent?
Well, so the dream would be that SAR can continue raising salaries and no longer raise tuition.
That's a great dream. When you wake up, then you have to wake up.
But you have to wake up and say, okay, is there a possibility? And even if you don't accomplish 100%, 80% of that number is a big number also. And it's a huge number. It's a number, basically, it was something like, did some calculations the other day, something like $150 million endowment. Now, which could start throwing off those numbers at 5%, and then still be compounding at a greater, because it's a huge number, and the number only gets bigger.
Right. And if you had that kind of endowment, what you would do with it would be to slow this tuition increase problem.
Again, if you had enough, I'd freeze it. Because in the reality, if you can freeze it, that 20 years from now, the tuition would be 50% of what it is today. And then everything will look very different. So, yes, it is a dream, but it's a dream that is possible. I mean, you just need you need the right source. And to me, in another crazy idea, if I was a state of Israel, I'd be supporting these schools.
Right.
Not all the schools, but I'd be supporting the schools that send kids.
The Jewish people, right?
Send kids to Israel. Because that inures to my benefit. and they can tax. I mean, they have unlimited ability to raise money.
Okay.
Again, I'm not going to get involved with Israeli politics, but it's possible within our community, within the United States, there are not that many schools like SAR. And these are the schools, and our graduates are the graduates that will make a difference to the life of the community, the Jewish community, going forward.
So you might have answered the question. I'm going to try to end with this, Jack. And I want to talk about SAR, but I also want to talk about, because I know that you care about the whole world and the whole Jewish world. Like, are you bullish on this enterprise? We talked about. You said there is a crisis. We have 1,000. We have 1,000 kids in elementary school. We got 1,600 kids in the institution. We're pretty much at capacity here at SAR. But that's not without pain. Do you feel like? It is interesting to me. I don't think we're hearing tuition crisis as much. Maybe that's just going to change today's school affordability. I don't think the crisis has gone away. But I guess, you've been doing this for a long time. You said 20 years. Are you bullish on the next 20 years in terms of this whole system being able to sustain itself? Or do we need like a massive reset?
It's a simple answer, because there is no other system. I don't think we have a lot of choice in dealing with our own kids. And again, as I said earlier, we run risks, and our parents run risks. We run sort of an open school. Our kids are open to a lot, which means that we do lose a percentage, or maybe even a significant percentage, of our kids to everything that's going on out there. But closing ourselves off from the society, I don't think it would help us. I think we only gain, and we only will grow if we participate in the society. And I'll give a great shout out to America. There is no other country like this country that has created this great opportunities, wonderful opportunities for all its citizens. There are lots of problems, and I think, and Benny, we speak about it often, I think it's important for our school to open ourselves up to people in our society who have not done as well. People in our society who maybe they came to America or differently than our parents did or our grandparents did. But we can take from what we've done, and we could be helpful. We live with schools in the Bronx. We could be helpful to schools in the Bronx that still suffer from single-family homes, still suffer from parents sending their kids to school just to get breakfast. Right? We need to integrate ourselves to that community, and then with us, because it inures to our benefit. We will do better, and we will be a stronger community if we live among the community and not try to isolate ourselves.
I mean, I think that you've kind of maybe introduced our next podcast, important topic. I mean, we've spoken about this, as you said, a lot. We were open last year. We're very proud to be open last year, but most of the schools around us weren't. So we feel very blessed, and maybe that's just an illustration of how important this enterprise is for our own community. But I think it's also important to recognize that we can and we should and we need to challenge ourselves to be involved with the people around us. And unfortunately, sometimes it happens with tragedy or with hard things. There was a fire a couple weeks ago in the Bronx in this community, and Ariel Wiener is one of our very involved lay leaders and parent volunteers. Literally, to move mountains to make a difference here over a couple of days and to connect with them. But I think there's a lot more that we can do. So I appreciate you focusing us on that value, because it's not just about us. It's really about being the values that I think we try to teach our kids every day and believing in them.
Right.
Deborah May, our executive director, thank you very, very much, not only for being here, that's a half hour, but for what you do every day
thank
to
you.
make this
it's
enterprise.
A privilege.
Thank you very much. And to Jack for we haven't figured out, but around 35 years of service. And
It's time to go.
Don't go.
Never.
Don't go. Thank you very much, all. Have a great night.